So we found this article in Entrepreneur magazine called 5 Compelling Reasons Why Every Entrepreneur Should Consider Starting a Nonprofit. Probably not every. Let's talk about why.
We are Ted and Lisa Snyder, and we are nonprofit consultants because we believe a better world needs healthier nonprofits. Now, when I saw this article, immediately I was like, I disagree. It didn't even matter what the thing said, but you know, we want to make sure that we're actually reading resources, and there are a lot of great reasons for entrepreneurs to start nonprofit organizations. And so we have an interesting conversation about this. We're going to go through the 5 reasons and just kind of chat about the pros of this, the cons of this, the things that people don't think about when it comes to starting nonprofit organizations. And this is really big.
Yeah, I'm always wary
Always.
of sentences that use superlatives, like every entrepreneur. So I'm always wary of those kind of sentences. But for real though, when I see every entrepreneur should consider, I'm like, no.
I do appreciate that they use the word consider versus should start. Now, for most entrepreneurs, I think that consideration time should be about 5 seconds, or maybe the length of this video.
It's good.
But let's kind of get into it. We won't read the whole article, but we will link it below. So if you want to check it out, you're welcome to.
Yeah. And this article is it's very positive toward the idea of starting a nonprofit. They don't really talk about the negatives. So that's what we're going to cover. Yay! All right. First of all, boost your credibility, trustworthiness, and goodwill in the marketplace.
I guess.
Works if your nonprofit does good things and actually works and does a great job. So, otherwise, you're going to tank your trustworthiness and goodwill in the marketplace.
Right. So one issue that we've seen with nonprofits is when they are started with any purpose other than the cause, there is a huge chance that something is going to go off the rails. Either the nonprofit is going to start being run poorly and stuff is going to fall through the cracks. And then people start second guessing whether or not you are a competent business person. Or it starts to take over so much of your life that your business actually starts to fail. And this isn't always the case. It's not always the reality of it. But it is something to consider. This is that one of the major advantages is that you get credibility, goodwill, trustworthiness, exposure, and impact that a business or individual can gain and develop in the community. Now, I will say I love businesses that are philanthropic, that are looking for ways to give back. But a lot of times it's actually more effective and efficient for a business owner to strategically partner with a nonprofit than to start a nonprofit of their own. Because you still get the credibility, trustworthiness, and goodwill without having to be the one getting this whole new venture off the ground and getting it going.
Last week, actually, we had an article that we looked at that was like, sometimes nonprofits just shouldn't exist. People just start them. And why? Like, sometimes they just shouldn't be started. And I think
because of stuff like this.
Absolutely. Yep. The next section says the ability to qualify and leverage millions of dollars worth of grants and funding. Free money, baby. What are your thoughts about the free money promise?
So grants and funding, there's actually a ton of resources out there that nonprofits can leverage. Mm-hmm. Now, one thing that this doesn't tell you is 67% of all funding that comes into nonprofits is actually from individual donors, not from grants and those avenues. Now, if a business were to start a nonprofit, yes, they have access to all those grants and funding, but people think that those grants and funding are a lot easier to get than they really are. They're not impossible, but it's learning a whole different language. And if you're learning how to write grants versus learning how to ask individuals for money, those themselves are 2 very different languages that you're speaking.
Yeah, and just think about all of the time that you could be spending as an entrepreneur in your business, running your business, making money, and then donating tons to an awesome, well-run, well-funded, well-purposed nonprofit that's doing the same thing that you care about.
Just to put this in perspective, it can take a lot of time for a nonprofit to get a $10,000 or a $50,000 grant. If you are a business owner who is doing really well, how many sales is it going to take you to get that $10,000 or $50,000? Now, you might be like, those aren't quite apples to apples. But as the business owner, you could figure out a way to become the grantor or to actually give that money to a nonprofit. So not only do you have the goodwill for that nonprofit because you're helping the community, but you have the ability to have the influence that you would have if you were over the nonprofit without actually doing any work of the nonprofit. And often it's easier for businesses to make the money and then just give that money away versus trying to be the ones to learn how to go after grants and going after funding. Yes, there's a ton of stuff out there. Yes, you could strategically set it up and maybe cross promote to some of your business stuff, but then you're getting into some weeds with some other things that you need to be very careful of so that people aren't looking at you going, you're saying nonprofit, but it's all helping your for-profit business.
Right.
It becomes gray, and gray area nonprofit work is not good.
Is not good. I mean, the whole point of nonprofit is for it to be completely transparent so people can see through it and see what's going on the inside. And if you have this weird motivation that is like, haha, I'm going to do this nonprofit so I can leverage millions of dollars, like, people are going to find that out. I mean, I bet you could, when I said that, you can think of 3 nonprofits you've heard of in the last decade that got in trouble.
Scandals.
Yeah, all the nonprofits.
Nonprofit leader was skimming off the top.
Yeah, they're all about that.
Even if they weren't, it was the perception that they might have been.
Right.
Like, nonprofit leaders are not allowed to look like they have money according to society. And if you have a business, it doesn't matter. They still count it as you're taking it from the nonprofit.
Yeah, not from a legal sense, but from a cultural sense.
From a cultural sense.
People from the outside are like, why is that nonprofit leader driving a Porsche? Well, it's like, well, they own a business. Well, it doesn't matter. They're a nonprofit leader.
Well, then they should give more to their nonprofit. I've heard that.
Yeah,
well, they
exactly.
should give more. So be careful.
Yep. Okay, third, tax incentives associated with donating or investing in nonprofit causes. Tax loopholes.
I actually agree with this. Tax incentives associated with donating or investing in. This is not about starting a nonprofit.
Right.
I 100% agree with this. If you are a business owner, I strongly urge you to consider how you could donate. Talk to your CPA and see how you could leverage this. Now, in very specific circumstances, it might be worth not starting a nonprofit as much as possibly starting a foundation. Set up a specific way so you can maybe retain a little bit more of the money. But if you can, or retain a little bit more control of the money, excuse me. But if you can find a nonprofit that you trust, I think that this point is fantastic and has nothing to do with starting a nonprofit.
Yeah, you don't have to start a nonprofit to take advantage of the tax incentives with donating or investing in nonprofit causes. You can donate to St. Jude and boom, you got all the tax incentives.
Yep.
All right. Why don't you read the next one?
Increase the net value of your business by adding a nonprofit component. Maybe.
I mean, that is only if it doesn't decrease from your ability to run your business well to the point where it cancels out, or it doesn't actually work to try to run a nonprofit as well as a business. Like, that's like trying to run 2 successful businesses.
Yeah.
Like, you can't look at it and say like, oh, I'll just add nonprofit and it'll be easy. Like, no, they're 2 businesses. And while they can partner well together sometimes, they also are 2 different businesses. You're trying to run 2 businesses now, not just one.
2 businesses, 2 models, 2 different tax structures,
2 different leadership
styles and structures.
Yeah, with board members now, you have to deal with other people. Like, if you're an entrepreneur, you don't like having a board, I bet.
Like, the thing is, if you have a nonprofit, you have a board, which means you can start something, get it going, and unlike a business where you retain ownership unless you were to bring it public, your board can fire you. And that can be difficult for someone who is truly, like, that has that entrepreneurial spirit where you want full control and be able to, move as you need to. That can be really difficult. Now, the first I'm going to read a couple paragraphs of this one. It says, imagine for a second that you're an investor looking to invest in a company and you're faced with 2 choices. Invest in company A or B. Let's say company B is identical to company A, but also has a nonprofit arm that is funded and backed by Fortune 500 organizations and government agencies, has strong tax reduction strategies in place, and gets exposure and publicity due to their philanthropic work. Which one's more attractive? Well, obviously company B, but let's be clear.
That's just not fair.
Most nonprofits aren't that a business is going to start isn't automatically going to be funded and backed by Fortune 500 companies.
Right. That takes a lot
That takes a lot
of work.
Now, there is a third component here, Company A, which is just kind of standalone, or Company C, which is identical to Company A, but they're able to use part of their marketing budget to actually give to nonprofit organizations, and people within the community trust them because they know that part of that money is going back into the community. Like the dichotomy that they set up here between either you don't have a nonprofit or you get one and it's backed by Fortune 500 companies and government funded and da 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 da. There's so much work there. And if you are operating a business at that big of a scale where you can bring in someone else to run your nonprofit arm and have everything in place so that you don't really have to touch it, that's a different story. But if you are a general entrepreneur, which this is talking to the average entrepreneur, this isn't fair. Like,
it's not
what
a fair
they
comparison.
set up here as a comparison is not average.
Would you rather have a sandwich or would you rather have
a bar of gold?
An identical sandwich, but this one was made by Dave Ramsey or Gordon Ramsay. Dave Ramsey. So a sandwich by Dave Ramsey or a sandwich by Gordon Ramsay? They're both made by a Ramsey. They're the same sandwich. They're not the same sandwich, okay? This is not Company A and Company B. Very different situations, very different like abilities are required to be able to do Company B.
And you can invest the net value of your business, but they're talking about net value in terms of like social capital. And you can invest or you can increase that in many different ways. But at the end of the day, your net value of your business, if you were to sell it, like the nonprofit is a separate entity. And yes, there might be bylaws in place that protect it, that keep it with the organization, but there are so many other pieces to this that this article just doesn't address. It sounds great and it hurts my brain.
This last one, I like.
Yeah.
Creating your legacy and leaving a deeper footprint in your marketplace. Now, there's a reason Lisa and I, we have, our business is called Legacy Builders. We care about legacy. We care about the idea of what we care about living beyond us for generation after generation after generation, the values and the things that we want to see changed in the world, like pushed forward. And so leaving a legacy is really important to us. And so I get this. You can leave a legacy if you're able to start a nonprofit in a different way than if you start a business, because nonprofits, if they're set up well in the beginning, they can operate without you, and they're meant to operate without you. They're meant to survive the founder of the organization passing away at some point. Yep. They're meant to live further.
Yeah, and I think this creating your legacy and leaving a deeper footprint in your marketplace is so important. I think that businesses, especially entrepreneurs, you have a very special way that you can impact the marketplace. And also, you nonprofit leaders, chances are you are entrepreneurs at heart and opted to go into the nonprofit sector, which is fantastic. But as a nonprofit leader, you also know that to start a business side by side with what you're doing right now, yes, it is possible. Yes, you could do it. But you're, again, looking at two different tax structures, two different leadership styles, two different everything. And that's not impossible. I want to be clear about this. We're not saying this is impossible. We're not even saying that no one should do it. But the idea that these benefits every entrepreneur should consider it, or that these businesses only come into play if you start a nonprofit side by side with your business, it's just not true.
Oh, the benefits.
Or the benefits. Yeah. There are so many people who are entrepreneurs making a massive impact in this world, or making a massive impact in their community, or making a massive impact for their family. That don't own, no one owns a nonprofit, but that aren't operating a nonprofit. Right. There are also people making massive impact who do work within a nonprofit or lead a nonprofit. And the impact that we are supposed to make and the legacy that we are to leave isn't determined by a tax structure.
Yeah, and I would add this too. An alternate version of this article would be equally as silly. 5 reasons why every nonprofit leader should consider starting a business. Like, as a nonprofit leader, I don't have time for that. Like, that should be the entrepreneur's mindset.
Yeah, I don't
have time to run, but it's just the way they talk about it. They're like, oh, running a nonprofit's easy. It's not easy. In fact, there are a lot of things they don't tell you when starting a nonprofit. And we actually have a video where we talk about those things, and they're kind of comical, but they're also kind of informative. And maybe you can resonate with some of these things. Maybe some of them would be like, oh, I could really use a solution to that. So we have a video about that you can go ahead and click on 5 things they don't tell you when starting a nonprofit, and we'll see you over there.